Hey guys, I hope you're having a great holiday season. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 PSX-inspired indie horror games released in 2022. Now, most of these can be found on itch.io. A few are on Steam. I'll leave a link in the description for each entry on the list. And just to be clear, this is strictly my opinion. There were lots of great games to choose from, and I found it surprisingly hard to narrow it down to just 10. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started. Coming in at number 10, we have Our Lady of Sorrow, where recently discovered VHS footage reveals a harrowing journey into the history of Kilcree Abbey and mad tales of a witch who met her fiery end there. This game was developed by Tooth and Claw, aka Dan McGrath. He's been one of my favorite developers for a long time. He made the Harmful series and the House of Unrest for Dread XP. Now, this is a found footage type of game, and actually you as the player kind of play a more passive role. You're basically investigating this creepy church and its cemetery and courtyard. You're following the story, and as you delve deeper and deeper into the ruins, you come across some pretty unsettling sights, and there are events that unfold that kind of push the story forward, and the whole thing is super creepy. The game is about 30 minutes long, give or take, and I love the setting. It's raining, it's foggy, there's a howling wind outside. There's no music, it's just your footsteps and ambient noises, and you're going to see lots of signs detailing the history of the place. It's actually a real historical site. You can even look it up on Wikipedia for more information. But as the game progresses, and you get closer and closer to the truth of the place, it gets creepier and creepier. So yeah, it's well worth taking a look at and experiencing the horror of Kilcree Abbey. At number 9, we have The Pale by Video 1. It's a 90s-inspired survival horror game where a new lighthouse keeper must brave the dread dangers and survive the frightening mysteries of a cursed island. Now, this is a demo. It's about an hour long, maybe, and it's played in third-person perspective, which naturally is going to bring to mind Silent Hill. This game excels at creating tension. There's this whole atmosphere of dread happening. Our character has taken over the job of lighthouse attendant, and it's pretty obvious from the get-go that something is amiss on the island. You find a map, you have a journal, an inventory screen. You're tasked with getting things up and running, and in order to do so, you'll have to explore the island and discover its secrets. Another thing I find really engaging is the abundance of puzzles we need to solve. But just know that even though the place looks abandoned, looks can be deceiving. The developers took a cue from H.P. Lovecraft and injected a preternatural aura into the New England setting, and also give us a frightening enemy we'll need to avoid. I believe they are finalizing a full release for Steam at some point in the near future, so be ready for that, but in the meantime, do not miss this demo. Next up at number 8 is He Just Wants to Play by Mux Games. We play as Charles, who goes looking for his friend in an abandoned house, but unwittingly falls into the clutches of a masked killer. This game is heavily and admittedly inspired by the work of Puppet Combo, as well as the classic Granny game. We have to find various objects that help us solve puzzles and enter new areas, but also we're looking for 5 different computers scattered in different rooms that will help us unlock the house and escape. And the whole time, the bunny-masked maniac is stalking us and trying to recapture us. There's no music in this game, and to be honest, I feel like that's detrimental to the atmosphere, especially during chase scenes with the killer. But the overall gameplay is strong, and there are plenty of scares to be had. There are 3 endings, and one of which reveals a very sick and twisted motivation behind the killer's deeds. Anyway, definitely check it out. I'm curious what Mux Games comes up with next. At number 7, we have Night Stop by Johnny's Games. When a motorist discovers bloody VHS tapes at a seemingly abandoned gas station, the harrowing search for answers begins. Now, this is a developer who is quickly building an impressive body of work. He also made Nailhead for Haunted PS1's Madvent 2022, as well as Slide in the Woods, which was popular in its own right. But Night Stop is my favorite because There's so many different aspects to it, and different gameplay mechanics. We start out in our car on a deserted road. We're steering, that's mechanic 1. We then pull up to a mysterious gas station where we find videotapes that we watch, and suddenly we become the attendant mopping the floors, mechanic number 2. Later, we're back as the motorist, and we're investigating the odd occurrences that we witnessed on the tapes. It's obvious not all is what it seems. Something sinister is afoot, as they say. What happens next? Well, I won't spoil it for you, but let's just say we get a lot more than we bargained for in stopping to get gas. This game also has a really cool soundtrack with actual songs, and that really adds to the experience as a whole, I think. But honestly, one of the best aspects of the story is its unpredictability. Like, you're going to be amazed at where the plot takes you. Definitely check this one out. Coming in at number 6, we have The House by Spring Rabbit. A weekend away at an isolated farmhouse seems idyllic until one vacationer notices something is terribly wrong. Spring Rabbit is another developer who is associated with the lo-fi horror style of Puppet Combo. They have another great title called Westgrove that is worth taking a look at, but this game is by far more ambitious. As a matter of fact, I think The House wades into Jordan King territory. Now, Jordan King is a big name in Puppet Combo's Torture Star publishing label. Anyway, we play as Amanda, who, along with 3 friends, is staying at a rural cottage. They're mainly interested in boozing it up and partying all night, but that plan gets derailed pretty soon when Amanda ventures off on her own. Now, a lot of this game is exploring the house and its surroundings, slowly discovering details about an ominous threat that lurks within. But the beauty of The House is that it's meant to resemble an old slasher film from the 80s. And it does a good job, I think. The characters are pretty one-dimensional, but that's probably deliberate. And I love the character models, and the faces especially. And by the way, I guarantee you won't be able to predict the ending. So yeah, Spring Rabbit is definitely a developer to keep an eye on. Alright, we're in the top 5 now, and so we're going to start getting into the heavy hitters here. Coming in at number 5 is The Night of the Scissors by Celevi? I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But this developer has a great pedigree with a variety of styles. He's made dungeon crawlers, an excellent first-person shooter, and now a third-person survival horror game about a scissor-wielding maniac that terrorizes a burglar who is unknowingly broken into his lair. We play as Adam, and we've broken into an old building looking for scrap and anything we can sell. But it soon becomes apparent that we're not alone. I like that the killer in this game is called the Snipper, and his weapon of choice is, you guessed it, a pair of razor-sharp scissors. Now let me warn you, this game is panic-inducing. Very, very scary, with jump scares galore. It's a game that will give you anxiety because the killer is very fast and hard to escape. There's tons of exploration, puzzles to solve, some item hunting, and it even has a great synth soundtrack that's straight out of the 80s. I'm telling you, this game is super cool, but it's terrifying. It's also on Steam, so if you haven't yet played it, what are you waiting for? Next up at number 4, we have Deadly Night by Cubite Games. Having hitchhiked to a roadside motel, young beauty Carol is accosted by the lascivious owner, an encounter that soon proves to be the least of her worries. Now, this was released under the Torture Star publishing label, and Cubite Games is the latest developer to join the Puppet Combo fold. I should probably mention the game is meant for players 18 and up because of racy dialogue and disturbing themes, but man oh man, Deadly Night is a real treat for survival horror fans. It perfectly captures the look and feel of an old 80s slasher flick. We have to elude a psychotic killer first at a motel, then a ramshackle house, and finally on an old family farm where we learn the killer's origin. The game is about 2 hours long. There's lots of puzzles to solve. We have an inventory screen, and all the while there's a lunatic on the loose stalking us and generally just making things difficult. What's interesting about the gameplay is how we get to play as different characters, and there's different endings depending on our actions. There's a save feature, an alternate mode, and various settings to customize our experience. All in all, Deadly Night is an epic screen fest with tons of replay value, and you'd do well not to miss it. Sitting at number 3 is Heartworm by Vincent Adinolfi. In an attempt to contact her deceased loved ones, a young woman investigates an old house rumored to have a connection to the hereafter. This is a half-hour-long demo that's been kicking around for a couple of years, but it's nearing completion. You can find it on Steam as well as itch.io, and everything about this game is amazing. There's professional voiceover work, an outstanding soundtrack that really adds to the mood. The whole thing is a love letter to 90s survival horror classics like Resident Evil and Dino Crisis. To me, the thing that stands out the most, that really sends this game to the stratosphere, is the inclusion of fixed camera angles. They make the story so cinematic. It's just a joy to play through. It's full of emotion, tense moments. You could call it a psychological thriller. And there's a really cool game mechanic where the protagonist's career, or maybe it's a hobby, comes into play. Her name is Sam, and she's a photographer. And in the game, she faces these odd, light-infused beings who are attempting to thwart her goal. Her camera becomes our weapon, and we have to snap photos of these enemies to vanquish them. And as we play, the story slowly reveals itself, and it's just a wonderful experience that I highly recommend. This game is, when the full release comes out, it's going to be a huge hit. An early version was included in the Haunted PS1 Demo Disc 2020, and there's been several updates since then. But yeah, if you're a fan of Resident Evil and Silent Hill and fixed camera angles, then look no further. Alright, this list wouldn't be complete without the inclusion of the man himself, Puppet Combo, and Stay Out of the House could probably be considered his magnum opus. Just in case you're not familiar, Puppet Combo has pioneered the new wave of PSX-Style 80s VHS slasher horror games, and he's been at it for just over 10 years. His games have inspired countless imitators, some who have gone on to develop their own unique styles. If you were to glance at the horror section of itch.io today, you'd see what I'm talking about. Now, Stay Out of the House has been years in the making, but it finally received a full release in 2022, and all of the Puppet Combo hallmarks are there. The VHS filter, the low-poly PSX graphics, the spooky sounds and eerie soundtrack, and of course, an ever-present villain. In this case, a backwoods madman named the Butcher. Most of our time is spent in captivity, trying to escape a dilapidated farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. The inspiration is obviously Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the game succeeds in capturing the grit and grime of that hallowed horror classic. To survive, we must stay low, keep quiet, and slowly make our way around the house unseen while gathering items and tools that will hopefully help us make our escape. Make no mistake, this game is nerve-wracking. There's an oppressive air that permeates the whole place the whole time. You never know when the Butcher will reappear and give chase. And my god, does that make it terrifying. If you are a fan of survival horror, you owe it to yourself to grab this game and play it. It's on Steam, and it's an absolute must-have. Alright, at number 1 we have Night at the Gates of Hell by Jordan King, aka Black Eyed Priest. This is the latest release from Torture Star Video, and the follow-up to last year's gruesome laundry horror game, Bloodwash. Now, I've talked about developers who were inspired by Puppet Combo and went on to become stars in their own right. Well, Jordan King has got to be the most successful example of this. His games share the same VHS aesthetic, the same affection for blood and gore, and the same willingness to shine a light on the seedy underbelly of society that we see in Puppet Combo's work. But he also likes to inject dark and sometimes goofy humor into situations and the dialogue, and that's on full display in this game. Night at the Gates of Hell is about 2 to 3 hours long. It's heavily inspired by 70s Italian horror, or giallo cinema, and it's a zombie game, a first-person shooter zombie game. Our character is simply trying to get through a doomsday event while frantically searching for other survivors, and it's a blast. There's lots of humor, lots of flashy, vibrant colors, and lots of zombies that were painstakingly created so that each one is unique and different from the last. I mean, Obviously, the developer went the extra mile to make that happen. The entire game is fully voice cast, the synth music is appropriately sparse but creepy, but the central mechanic, the first-person shooter aspect, is what sends this game over the top and gives it more mass appeal and more replayability. That's why I consider Night at the Gates of Hell my number one on this list. And there you have it, the top 10 PSX-inspired indie horror games of 2022. Like I said at the beginning, it was tough to narrow them down. Your list might look a little different from mine. Have you played all these games though? If not, you should definitely check them out. I'm telling you, each one is well worth your while. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.